Welcome to the first episode of the Judge Jury Show. We want to explore the world of jury duty and to fully appreciate the duty and the power that we have as citizens as we perform jury duty. So I want to look at people's real lived world experiences in jury duty and to learn more about the law so that we can do our part in administering justice in the law. And it may entail more than what you think. Jury duty may never seem boring again after we talk about some things. So I have with me today my sister, Elena. She has done jury duty. I have not. And I just want to talk about your experience. Just like we, grabbed coffee and just you came up about how you did jury duty. I'd love to just have a conversation here about your experience and kind of share my thoughts about the power that juries have and how that can make a difference for everyone, literally every single citizen. So with that, Lena, if you want to briefly introduce yourself and we can jump right in.
Oh, sure. Hi, thank you. Thanks, Jerome, for having me. Yes, my name is Elena, and I did serve as a juror. So that was a few years ago. I actually served in Illinois, and I do sales by profession, and that's just a little bit about me.
Cool.
Mhm.
Now I want to respect that. Well, I don't know a lot about the whole process end to end, so I want to be sensitive to things that you may not be able to share. So just tell us that if you can't share it. And but go ahead. What was it like?
Yes. So I just want to give like the time reference. So I actually served in 2019, so fairly recent. And it was my first time serving. So I'm just going to kind of like high level run through what it was. My first time serving, really not much knowledge about jury duty other than like the movies, TV shows, that kind of thing. So when I got summoned, I was kind of shocked. But so how I got chosen, I'm a registered voter and I have a valid driver's license. So I guess they picked me randomly from a pool. That's my understanding. And so I was summoned. I received a summons letter, and the letter just had information that I was summoned and that I had to respond. So either you could, let me see, I was going to say opt out, but that's not the term they used. You could either, hold on one second. I took a few notes here. Let's see. I wanted the right term for it, but I can't find it right now. But basically, on the letter, you you have to find out if you're qualified, and then you can do that. So it gave instruction. You could do that by paper, mailing it in, or you could do it online. So they had an online portal. And like I said, I served in Illinois, so that was going to be the local circuit county seat, county court near me. So it just so happened it was probably about roughly 30 minutes away from where I live at the time. And so if you didn't qualify, or you wanted to get it waived, basically, like waived, you could, there was certain criteria for that. So one of them I recall was if you're a caregiver to like very small children, then you could opt out of it. I'm not sure if military was on there for one. I'm not sure about that, but there was certain criteria to be able to not attend the jury selection process. So basically, I filled it out online. I chose to do it online, and they had a portal, an online portal, which was really nice. Actually, it was convenient. And in preparing for this this talk with you, I actually had to go back and recall, because it was a few years ago and I only did it once. I had to go back and recall what it was, and I was like trying to find on my like my documents on my hard drive and things like that, or just paper documents to see if I had any information about the case, the trial that I was on. And actually, I did find something, and I actually was able to log back into the portal and get further detail in there. So I was like, oh, that's nice. That's convenient. So it had actually a certificate in there, a certificate of service. So yeah. And then it keeps track, a log in the portal. Now, I don't know if all states have this or all jurisdictions have this, but the county that I was in, they did. So that was nice to be able to go back to that. So once I did go ahead, I filled out a questionnaire, and actually I found the questionnaire. So it had questions on there, like just general juror information, like your phone number, contact information. Then they wanted like your marital status, your employer, your how long you've lived in the county, if you've ever served on jury duty before, your occupation, your spouse's employer, children, their age, things like that. Then they wanted to know, do you have a relative or close friend who's ever been a party to a lawsuit, who's been a victim of a crime? So you have to answer all of these here. And then they had, have you ever practiced or know someone, a close friend or relative that practices as an attorney? Ever been a law enforcement officer? Or suffered a serious personal injury or charged with a crime? So you have to answer those questions to the best of your ability. And then once you submit that, then I'm trying to recall again how quickly I got the turnaround on that. I want to say may have been even possibly immediately, but it was pretty short term. So I qualified there, and then they moved on and gave me they gave me further information to basically start the process of the jury pool. So at that point, kind of just again, big picture is that there's a jury selection, then there's a jury pool, then there's the jury box, then there's the trial process. And then there's steps in between, of course. So at the point that I was at the jury selection, I was selected, and the trial case, I was trying to remember, I believe mine was a civil trial as opposed to a criminal trial. Because the plaintiff actually was not being charged with a crime. So actually the trial I was on was a unique kind of a case. So they weren't being charged with a crime. It was more of a legal determination of a classification, legal classification for this individual. And we had to determine that classification, whether they fit that classification or not. So I believe it was a civil trial.
Can you tell us what the classification is? The classification in question?
So I'm not exactly sure if we were allowed to still talk talk about it once the trial was over.
But yeah, let's not toe the line there. If it's
Yeah,
gray area, let's steer away from gray area. I was just wondering
right.
if you could.
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, yes, that would help to kind of explain things. But just to be clear, again, it was not for a crime committed. It was more if they were fit the criteria that would then have legal ramifications if they did fit this criteria, and were to go back out into society. So,
Was
let me,
it like I mean, and again, just
the,
stop
the,
stop.
yeah,
Is it like licensing related? Like, is this person indeed licensed, or is this person like disabled? Like, or can you?
I
Was
was, yeah, I would say it was more towards, I wouldn't say disabled, but I would say it's more towards that as opposed to like a professional licensure.
okay.
Not disabled in the sense that we would understand disabled. It was more so, are they a classified offender, a particular class of offender?
Okay.
So, which would be a serious, it's a serious crime, serious offense. And this individual already had served their time. So again, it wasn't a criminal trial. They had already served time for crimes that they had committed. Now they needed the court and the jury to be able to determine if they fit this class of offense. And then that would mean different things. Basically, it would mean restriction upon their life if they were in this class. If we determined that they were in this class, if we determined that they were not, they would have less restriction in freedoms in their life out in the world. So the jury, well, not the jury, but the service, the jury service, the trial itself. Actually, let me back up. The service itself lasted 4 days. And basically, so I broke it down kind of like the daily trial. And just if you have questions, just, as you've been doing this, just ask me throughout. Because as I was trying to think of, there's kind of a lot, but then I'm also trying to see, in general practice, what happens, but then also just what happened with me in my particular service. So then, like I said, there's the jury selection. They find out, are you even qualified? It's a screening process. Then, okay, you qualify. You go through, then there's the jury pool. At the jury pool stage, let me see here. Let me see if I'm skipping anything. Oh, I remember the term here. Excused. You could be excused. That was the term. Mm-hmm. I was like, so easy. Yeah, so simple. Yeah, excuse. I just want to share I'm not skipping any steps. Okay. So yes, of course you get information once they say you've been summoned, and then once they say, okay, you filled out the questionnaire, we're going to move you through on to the next stage. And then at that point, they give you information like the date for you to show up, the time, location, any parking instructions, things like that. And then you receive a juror's badge so that you can get in and out of the building, the courthouse. Okay. Now, one thing I did notice was at the time when I was working, when I first got summoned, because I wanted to get the timeline, when I first got summoned, it was actually like 30 days prior to when I actually started my service. So you have a time, 30 days. So what I did once I found out that I passed the questionnaire and I qualified, I then asked my employer, well, not asked my employer, legally, the employer has to permit you to serve in jury duty by law. Mm-hmm. So I informed my employer that I got summoned and that I would be I was being requested to serve. And so then they deal with that. Now, my particular employer at the time, they didn't. Now, I believe each state has their laws as to whether or not an employer basically pays you paid leave during jury duty service. My employer did not. So for those 4 days that I was serving, I did not receive my salary. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind for consideration.
Okay. They can't
now,
fire you, but they don't have to pay you either.
Correct. And like I said, that may be per, the state may just say, it's up to the employer, it's up to the employer, their discretion. So my employer did not pay me. So I'm just trying to.
You get a stipend?
Yes, I was just trying to think on that. You get a stipend. I looked up my total here because, like I said, I had to go back and my records. So I got paid $73 for those 4 days, and it was for mileage because I drove there. It was mileage and meals. I think it was mileage, meals, like slash service. So it totals $73. I don't know what is that? 73 divided by 4.
Was that more like $80 divided by 4? Do they already take out tax?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there was taxes.
Or did they give you like a pay stub?
See those details. I'm trying to recall.
Yeah, I know.
I think it may have been a check. It may have been a paper check. Yeah, I think it was a paper check. And they did pay me that next day because I was going back through the portal and I saw that they issued it like the next day after my service. So pretty prompt. And then let's see. Okay, yeah. So like I said, I informed my employer. So then the next stage, that was the jury selection. Next stage, I went on to the jury pool phase. And for that part, I'm just going to say in general. So they're qualifying for jury service. If you qualify for jury service, that does not guarantee you will actually serve on a jury, which I didn't have that understanding going into it. Because when I did go on my first day, they kind of had us in a waiting room for hours. Very, very large. Think of it like a huge DMV situation. Very large waiting room. And we were assigned a number. If your number was called, or wasn't, if your number was called, I believe, then you stayed, I want to say. If it wasn't called, then I think you were dismissed because they had several cases going on at the time. And so then they had to take from a huge pool of people and then basically, and I'm trying to remember, was it even alphabetically? I don't know if it was alphabetically, but they took it was like a huge pool of people. And then they divvied up that pool and put them on designated cases, trials. So you
recruited for multiple potential trials.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes, and I didn't know that. I thought like, oh, they selected the trial already. Right. For me, I was assigned to a trial, and then I was just going to go straight for that trial. Right. That was what I was thinking. That's not what happened when I got there. And so I was like, oh, okay. So one thing I will say, just being prepared, and again, this is just my own personal experience of what happened, was there was a lot of downtime. Yeah, there was a lot of downtime, a lot of waiting around. Again, just because they had to, funnel out and narrow down who was going to go. Well, I guess what actual trials that were going to be had, and then how many people, you know, they needed to go on those trials, and if they were fit to be on the trial. So then let's see. So yeah, so we checked in. Like I said, we went to this large waiting area for a few hours. Then we went to. So I made it through that. I made it through that selection. This is like day one. So I made it through that selection, and then there was another waiting area that was further into the into the room,
Okay.
into the building, and it had separate rooms, like a conference business center, like a little small cafeteria, and a little lounge. So for the most part, we were waiting there when we came in the subsequent days in that waiting area. So let's see where I'm at here. Okay, so then, and you could bring like a book or your laptop, something to occupy your time, you know. You could do that. And I was trying to recall, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I was going to say, could we talk about the trial with each other, amongst each other, even the jurors? I'm trying to remember, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So let's go back to, so now we're still in the jury pool phase. So then at that point, there was a trial that they needed us to be on. So a group of us, maybe I would say about 40 potential jurors, were taken to the courtroom where the trial was going to be. And from there, and again, like I said, mind you, I've never been in a courtroom before, so I'm just picturing, you know, like the movies and TV shows and stuff. Right. And it really was set up like that. It really looked like that. A lot of wood surrounding, you know, furniture and architecture. So we went into the courtroom that the trial was going to be in. And what I recall was, and I'm looking at my notes here while I'm talking, was that I remember that the judge was there, the attorneys were there, the attorney for the plaintiff, and then the prosecuting attorney, they were there, and then security and a court reporter was there. The judge, at that point, we were all kind of sequestered in the back of the courtroom. And like I said, it was maybe about, I want to say about 40 of us, maybe. Definitely like at least 30. So I would say about 30, maybe even 40 of us in the back. And then at that point, we were given instruction by the judge, just of how things were gonna happen. And just keep in mind, it's the entire process is very procedural. Okay. That's one thing that I, definitely noticed about it. It's a very procedural experience. So you have to pay very close attention to instruction. If you have any questions, you have to ask it, for clarification of things, whatever. So definitely active listening and paying attention. So let me see here, but it wasn't anything that was like, complicated. It was just that you just needed to be aware of what's going on and listen and follow. So let me see here. Yeah, so the judge, and I'm trying to recall if the attorneys also questioned the entire group. At this point, we're in the back. So remember, we're in the back of the courtroom. Mm-hmm. They asked us questions to determine if we would be suitable to serve on the jury. Mm-hmm. So at that point, to decide the case, if we'd be able to decide the case fairly. And that was stressed often, of why we were there and our purpose and our function. So the jury group was was asked questions as a group. So some of the questions were like, yes, no. Have you ever, I'm trying to remember, like, you know, some of them were repeated questions, like in the questionnaire that we filled out online or paper. You know, do you know anyone who was the victim of a violent crime? You know, so sometimes it was just yes or no questions like that. And then they basically weeded out people based upon their response. So then at that point, when we were all, you know, being asked yes or no, some people were being weeded out. And I'm trying to recall this as clearly as possible, but some of the details, you know, I may have it a little bit misinterpreted, but I'm just trying to go off of memory. So then I remember the entire group were being asked questions, and then they took maybe about, I would say 8 people at a time up to the jury box. And then from there they asked, and I recall it being, again, the judge, it may have been also the attorneys, but it's kind of hazy about whether the attorneys were asking, but they may have been asking, I just don't recall. So then the group of 8 that were actually at the jury box were being asked questions individually. And then so what I will say is at that point, especially the individual questions, it was pretty intimidating because it almost felt, for me it was. I don't know how the other jurors felt, but it was kind of intimidating because you kind of felt like you were, for me, I felt almost like a little bit like I was on trial, because it's unfamiliar. It's something, you know, you're basically being kind of grilled questions, even though there's not like a right or wrong answer. It's just screening questions, but it's just, you know, it's just kind of the nerves, and you're speaking in front of other people. And I think also it was kind of like, because I didn't know all of the responsibilities and the rules that go into it, it was just also kind of that of just the unknown of like not knowing exactly how things are supposed to go. So then you're just kind of like thrusted into it, you know, kind of blindly, basically.
Being processed.
Yeah, that's how it felt. It felt like you're being processed, and you're the one who's being, you know, questioned a little bit. I mean, that's how I felt anyways. But then as the process went on, where are we at? We're still at the jury pool portion. No, now we're at the jury box. Okay. So the jury pool, so they selected out of that. And then the ones that were left, then they're at the jury box phase, and they weed out the panelists. Let me see. Sorry if I'm repeating myself. Let me see here. Yeah. So the types of questions they were asking were like, did you know anyone involved in the case? Do you have any information about the case? They're trying to determine if you may have strong prejudices about the people or issues involved in the case, and there was even a language barrier as a criteria, because actually for the panel that was, you know, I was a part of, there were a couple people that were not English as a first language for them, and actually one of them was I don't know if they were trying to get out of it, but they were like, oh, I don't, really understand. And then they had a
English.
They had like a heavy accent, but the judge, like, he was like, oh, well, like, they went through the line of questioning with that individual, and they understood what the judge was saying. So the judge was like, basically, he wasn't buying it. So he kept that juror on.
Mm.
He kept that juror on, so they tried it. That juror tried it. But I mean, that is something for consideration, is the language, if there's a language barrier.
Mm.
So then let's see. So yes, at that point I made it through with, I want to say 11 other people. So I think it was 12 of us.
Well, 12, yeah.
And I was going to say, again, don't quote me on this because it's a little hazy, but I believe it was 12. So we were the final 12. And so at this point I was up, on the jury box. And like I said, they were asking us questions. So
was this a public, or is this a public case, or is it a private case? Do you know?
I don't know. I want to say, yeah, I don't know for sure.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember if they said, that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to remember if they said we could discuss it after. And I thought that well, there's another point, to have that in writing, basically, once we've completed the case, to give us something to say what you're saying. Is this a public case? Can we discuss it? Because just in case you forget, you know what I mean, or whatever.
Ironically, you being on this show is going to get you in jail.
So I was gonna say I have some connection issues here, so
right.
That's a good question, but they should signify that, I think, in writing. That would be helpful. So let's see. Yes, so it was us 12. Oh, so funny thing that kind of a funny thing that happened when they were asking, because I will say this, we had psychologists as our as the evidence, as part of the evidence. They had professionals' opinions or understandings, opinions, and expertise. So when they were sharing that with us, prior to the trial actually starting, while we were still in this jury box weeding out process, so the final 12 were selected. When I was being questioned, again, it was those yes/no questions, and one of the questions I guess I get caught up in it, because it's just, again, like I said, it's just like, it's kind of a lot coming at you, and the nerves and nervousness and stuff like that, and just like, for me, it was kind of intimidating, just because it was just law, like legal stuff happening. It was just like, I don't know enough about this, and that just,
Okay.
you know what I mean? For me, it was quite intimidating at times, especially in the beginning. I mean, that was day one. I want to say day one, maybe day two. So especially in the beginning. So then, so one of the lines of questioning they had was if you had been exposed to or had been exposed to or been involved with those type of professionals. And so I responded no, because again, it was like all 12 of us. So it's like yes or no. I'm trying to remember, do you raise your hand, or was it like raise your hand? It may have been a raise your hand thing, or yes or no. I'm trying to think how they knew the answer, how we gave the answer. And I said the incorrect information. Like I said, I got caught up. I said their incorrect information. And so I was like, oh, snap. And then like the judge kept moving on to the next, continuing with the process.
You misspoke.
I misspoke.
Corrected. Okay.
Right. I misspoke, and I didn't correct it like immediately, because it was one of those things where you're just like, am I allowed to speak? Like, it just seems so you know what I mean? It's like, can you interrupt? Like, can you interject? Be like, excuse me? Like, it was
the court. Excuse me.
right and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do I like? What do I do? So what I ended up doing was, I want to say it was possibly even the next day. Or I'm trying to think what's the time lapse, how much time there was. But it was not right away. So there was some time lapse, but I did correct it. I did correct it, and I actually spoke one-on-one with the judge, up at his, his what do you call it? I was supposed to say podium, bench, up at his bench, and I told him that I misspoke, and that what I said and then what I meant to say, and he was like appreciative of that. And he was like, that's what we look for, in a juror, and this, da da da. And so he kept me on. So he kept me on the jury. And that was just like a little sidebar. And so I guess that to say, like, you could speak up,
Okay.
Mistakes happen. I guess that's to say mistakes happen and you can correct it. So, okay, let me see here.
So
yeah, I guess. Okay,
what was the first step called? Jury pool, jury box. What was the first step again?
Yeah, jury selection.
Jury selection, jury pool,
jury, and then the jury box.
Jury box.
Then I would say then it's the trial process. So I'm just going to say it's just a few steps. The trial process itself was there was an opening statement. So I believe this was day 2. I want to say when I was on serving. So day 2. Because day 1 was kind of like all the selections, the questioning, day 2, I want to say, was the trial process. So then at that point, you have opening statements by the plaintiff's attorney. The plaintiff attorney also then presents evidence. The prosecuting attorney presents evidence. And I want to say the prosecuting attorney presented the evidence, I think, the 3rd day.
What's the difference between the plaintiff attorney and the prosecuting attorney?
Oh, the plaintiff is I think of it as like the defendant. I mean, again, this is just me coming from a layman's, I'm not an expert or anything in it, but the subject who is on trial. So the one who's defending the defendant. So
the plaintiff is the person who's on trial.
Yes.
Okay.
The plaintiff is the person who's on trial. And the prosecuting attorney is the one who is prosecuting against the one who's on trial.
Was the plaintiff there?
They were.
Okay.
Yes, they were. They weren't, I'm trying to think, they weren't there during, like I said, mentioned all the people that were there during the jury pool and jury box stages. But they were there that first day that we actually commenced trial, the plaintiff. Mm-hmm. The plaintiff was there. Again, like I said, some of the intimidation was, and like I said, this is just my own personal experience, was just that the plaintiff was like right there. So you're just like, the jury were off to the side, it's how you see it in TV.
Yeah.
The judge in the front, we're on this, jury's on the side, plaintiff, a little bit ways from the, kind of like in the center of a little bit in the center of the room, from the judge. So they were there, the plaintiff. So it was just, again, it's just like, so for me, it was like, there was a level, I would say, of like empathy and sympathy, because this is a real person. This is their life. And from that standpoint, and again, our judge that presided did a very good job of reiterating the importance of our duty as jurors and the heaviness of what that is and what that carries and how it impacts the the plaintiff's life, and the significance of that and the seriousness of that. So when you just see a person, I think I would say the other jurors too, because I talked to a few of them, and then got to bond with one actually, and that you could tell that our group of jurors had a sense of humanity with them, I would say, and saw the plaintiff as a person. So let me see here. So after the prosecuting attorney presents their evidence, then there's, again, this is just the trial process. Then there's closing statements by the plaintiff and the prosecutor attorneys. In the particular case trial that I was a part of, the plaintiff did not testify. That was their decision. We were informed that they chose that. So they never testified or took the stand. And so their attorney just, advocated for them on their behalf. So
so you said it was opening statement. You just mentioned a closing statement. What was in between?
Oh, no, the evidence. Yeah. So the opening statement by plaintiff's attorney. Then the plaintiff attorney presented evidence. In the case that I was a part of, they had experts.
The psychologists.
The psychologists were the main. Yeah, I would say the basically the only evidence. I think they had paper evidence, but it was mainly the psychologists that were the evidence. Which that's what I'm saying. Again, it was kind of an interesting. It was an interesting thing because with this, you had to. There was quite a bit of psychological concepts and terminology, and some things were a little bit technical. So you had to basically be able to follow along with what they were presenting. And I could see that if someone was not necessarily exposed to or had heard these concepts, some of the concepts, and terms, that they would maybe misinterpret some things or get a little bit lost. So I will say that was definitely a part of this trial. A part of the evidence that was given was a lot of jargon and concepts that were psychological in nature and for the nature of what the case was.
Like academic almost, or not?
Yeah, I would say some academic as well as professional. Professional terms and practices, and some academic, I would say. So and of course each case differs, and it just so happens the evidence was that. So after they present their evidence, then they have the closing statements by both sides, the attorneys, and then there's the deliberation. And then the jury, for us, it was unanimous. I believe it was unanimous. It wasn't it wasn't majority. It had to be, I think it was unanimous for us. Again, I'm trying to remember. I believe so. Okay. And so that's the trial process. Each day, the daily process, just a quick rundown of that. You go into building security, you check in, you check in with security, you got your badge, you could pass along. It's maybe 9 a.m. So it's like a job, like 9 to 5. Okay. So 9 a.m. check in, jury room. You're in that waiting room, that large waiting room. So then you go in the waiting room area, lounge. I want to say once it was maybe day 2, we were maybe in the waiting area, definitely less time than the first day. So I want to say we were there maybe like an hour-ish, about an hour or so. And then you're taken into the courtroom. From there, again, we're like, so imagine like school. So they just corral you. You're going to the weight room. Then you're being escorted, single file line, escorted in the hallways, and then you're waiting to enter the courtroom. So sometimes you were waiting outside to enter the courtroom. Then you go in the courtroom. Then you have that, and then even when we had our lunch break, so there's like a lunch break as well, and you can leave the premises. I did. I needed a change of scenery. Went out to lunch, locally. I went somewhere, and then came back. So designated time. I'm trying to remember, was it a half hour or an hour lunch? Again, it's a little hazy, but it was, a time for lunch break. You were given a small notepad and a pencil to take notes during the trial, which I did appreciate, because sometimes you just need to filter the information. And for us, in this case that we were in, there was a ton of information in sequential facts that we had to, because when the attorneys and the evidence is being given, it's not always chronologically. And then when you're hearing one attorney say, oh, this is how things happen and in a chronological order, or, that, oh, the plaintiff did this, and then da happened in consequence of that. But then you hear another
narrative
piece of evidence. Yeah, another narrative, because it actually can be. There were two, I want to say at least two psychologists or psychiatrists on the plaintiff's side, and I want to say possibly even the prosecuting side as well. So it wasn't like it was one psychologist per side. It was like multiples of them per side. And you have to, as a juror, so if they're saying one narrative, you could even have on one side, so the plaintiff side say, oh, well, ABC happened on these dates. And then they have their second therapists come on and say, psychologists come on and say, well, B actually happened on this date, which differs from what the first psychologist said. So then you have
the same side.
Well, I'm just saying you could have conflicting information even on the same side.
Okay.
And in addition to having conflicting information on the other side in comparison to, the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So the prosecutor side and the plaintiff side could have conflicting information, conflicting facts, conflicting information on the same, quote unquote facts, basically, or piece of fact. And so you had to keep track of dates, sequence, who said what happened, what was the consequence of what happened, and the being able to take notes helped to kind of sort that out and visually see that. So they did provide that to us, but then they collected the notepad before you left each day. You couldn't bring it home.
And you get your same notepad back?
Did we? Oh, that's a good question.
Okay.
That's one of those details I try to remember. Do we get the same one back? I don't know. I don't know if we got the same one back. I just recalled for sure they collected it. You could not bring it home. So we were instructed as well. Do not, you cannot, talk about, disclose the case to anyone. So, we uphold that, I upholded that, while the trial was happening. And let me see here. Yeah, I want to say, so you had the trial, then I want to say there was a lunch break, and then you went back to trial and you were sitting there. I don't recall another break happening. There may have been maybe one other break in the course of 9 a.m. to like 4 or 5 p.m. There may have been maybe like another break, another short break or something. But for the most part, you're sitting there. You're sitting there listening to the case, listening to a lot of evidence. So for us, I'm just going to fast forward. For us, we did deliberate, and the deliberation, I want to say it was at least an hour for the deliberation, because we did carefully consider the facts of the case. And there wasn't always, there was some disagreements. There was some points that because again, this was a classification, so there was like maybe 4 criteria. And on each point, each criteria, you had to be in agreement with all of us jurors had to be in agreement with each point, each criteria point. So there wasn't always agreement. There was discussion about our disagreement and what we were seeing, what our understanding of what was presented and what it meant, the evidence. I will say this, our jury was diverse in ethnicity. We had Black, brown, yellow, white. So it was diverse in ethnicity. It was diverse in male, female, as well as age. Because I want to say there was probably some people there that were like 19. I want to say, like young college students, 19, maybe 20-year-olds. And then I would say the oldest was like maybe even 60, definitely 50s. Definitely at least in the 50s, but possibly 60. So it's a good range of age as well. So we were a diverse group. I would say everyone carried themselves well. Everyone was very respectful to each other. There wasn't any like heated, disagreement. I mean, there was disagreement, but it was handled in a pretty respectful manner. We did have to choose a leader, basically, who was going to head kind of our juror group. And so that person would kind of like be the one that kind of got all the opinions of everybody together. And then they were then the person that, when the deliberation was over, was going to give that information to present it to the court. So there was an actual designated leader of us jurors. And that happened to be an older gentleman for our group. I'm just trying to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. So I will say for our deliberation, it was where that individual would be, our decision where that individual would be restricted in society, was the conclusion that they fit the criteria of that classification. That was what was decided. Now they had an opportunity to appeal our decision. So we were told that they could appeal. And then just kind of wrapping up the whole experience was, like I said, I got paid the stipend, and then I actually did receive a letter from the judge afterward, just thanking me for my service. So I thought that was a nice, very nice gesture, nice touch. I don't know how common that is, you know what I mean? Yeah. For that to happen, but I did appreciate that. And apparently, like I said, when we first started this, I got a certification, which either I forgot or didn't realize. But when I went back into the jury portal, I saw that I have an actual certification of having served as a juror. So I think, I'm just trying to see if I think that's, I had a couple other things, but I want to see if you have anything to ask. That's pretty much the overall, I would say. There's just a couple of things that I had noted, but I want to hear from you.
I mean, it's pretty thorough. I mean, it's interesting. I didn't even entertain. We were intending to have a couple others, actually 3 others on. So hopefully they can join at a later time. But basically, we're going to kind of compare and contrast experiences in terms of procedure and some, just see how it goes. So I think you did it clear, and I'm kind of, taking it all in. I didn't even consider there were court cases with a jury concerning just classification. So it basically wasn't a guilty, not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
It was, this is amongst X number of classifications. This is the proper one.
Mm-hmm.
Or even, So that's interesting. Go ahead. I won't forget.
Well, the only thing about that I will say is, I'm gonna just refer to my point that I had as a comment, because this is kind of my sentiment, was that I put on here, you may feel some imposter syndrome, like feeling unqualified or incompetent to interpret the law and or determine the facts of the case. I'm just saying, I mean, for me, I felt it. So I can't speak for other jurors that were there with me, but I felt a degree of that. But the other piece is you may not feel 100% confident or comfortable in your verdict. I did experience that. And I remember, like I said, that I bonded with like one of the other jurors.
Mm-hmm.
I remember saying to that juror, I hope we made the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
Because the premise of the case itself, like I said, I didn't know that there was any such thing as classifying somebody legally either.
Mm.
And so I just didn't know. I didn't know if the evidence was 100% provable, because some of it was based upon possibility as opposed to real life experience. Like, how did this individual, what did they actually do out in the world versus what's the probability of what they may do if they go out into the world? May they commit a crime? May they commit this type of crime if they were to have certain freedoms? So again, it's kind of like, I mean, there's not really certainty there.
Right.
Now you're dealing with things like probability and how likely is it. You can't. I mean, I felt like we were playing God in a way, to say that's something between that individual and the universe, and God, and what they're gonna, who can say, So it just may be, just on that point, it may be a situation where you may not know or feel comfortable that the verdict was the right one.
Mm.
I don't know how common that is with other jurors and other cases, but
that's good to know as well. This doesn't apply, it seems, in your situation, and maybe in another episode, later episode, but jury nullification. This wouldn't apply, it seems.
can you explain?
Jury, yeah, sure. Jury nullification is basically the jury. Actually, I'm not sure I would apply in this situation, but if you have a guilty, not guilty verdict type of situation, the jury can, they can decide however they please. So basically, the judge will normally say you have to make a decision strictly based upon infraction. I'm trying to word it in a way that's subjective and fair. But basically, you have to look at the law in question and make a decision based upon that. But jury nullification says, the law itself is not really, regardless of the bottom line, is you get to say guilty or not guilty, regardless of the reason why. You don't have to say guilty or not guilty based upon adherence to the law or not. They have the power, bottom line. You can't sue the jury if they make a decision that makes no sense. This is solely their right, with no recourse for the jury. So for a guilty versus not guilty decision that has significant consequences, it's unclear in this situation, if at all, if it's applicable. But I would say, so we're just a little bit over an hour. Got started a little bit late, but I think that was a very good overview of one experience, one jurisdiction, one type of case, of classification. in your situation. So yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. Other than this is really kind of ongoing exploration of, listening to. We hear from maybe from lawyers. We hear maybe from people who've been on trial, or I don't know so much about judges, but I don't know if we necessarily hear much about from the jury. And so it's called the Judge Jury Show because the jury is the judge. They make the judgment, and you kind of alluded to that. You're playing God. It's like, well, if that's the way the system works, how do you exercise that power responsibly? So first, we got to understand what's it actually like and how to mentally prepare yourself. I think you addressed that a lot. Intimidation, not because people were necessarily being antagonistic, but just being so very procedural and being thrust into a tightly a strict system that you're unfamiliar with is in of itself intimidating, and wanting to be efficient. And so just like, oh, should I interject? And then the answer is yes. It's better to interject and clarify and correct in real time at the risk of coming off rude, if you will.
And
go ahead.
And can I just say, I mean, you can always, excuse me, you can always raise your hand. There's a way to do it that's, right, not rude.
Yeah. But I mean, it might in your head come off as rude, even to interject.
Yeah.
Psychologically,
right.
But do that, in the most respectful way you can. So that was very good. Because I think this is people, we know it's a duty as a citizen, but we don't really talk about. I don't even know if there is such a thing in any context to prepare for jury duty. So really, what we're doing here is we're preparing the masses for jury duty through real lived experiences. And the idea is that hopefully people will watch this and others, and for other people who come on and their jury duty experience, and kind of compare and contrast, if you will. So appreciate you basically being kind of maybe the first of hopefully very many to prepare for this. And again, last thing I have to say is in the coming episodes, we're going to be talking about well, I'll say it in a moment. I'll give you final words, or any way you want to plug yourself, let people know where to find you, and then I'll say final words.
Yeah, no plugs right now. I'm just so glad I could be a part of what you're doing here with educating, the masses, and I'm glad that my experience might be able to help another. Maybe be a little more prepared than I was. So thanks for having me. I did have kind of a final note. There are resources online. So at least, actually there was, what is this? www.uscourts.gov. They have where you can learn about the jury service. So that's a good resource. I mean, I didn't look into that when I was serving, but
one more time, what was that?
Yeah, it's www.uscourts.gov. But then there's some more after that. But there's learn about jury service. So there's under services, you'll find the jury services under uscourts.gov.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, just to kind of give an overview. Yeah. So and then I learned something on there too, was that so apparently the judge, they determined the law that they are basing the actual trial on. So I guess there's a premise so they have the case, but then the law is being the particular law that I guess the trial is based on. Apparently the judge is the one that is deciding what that is. Now, for me as a juror, I didn't know that. I looked that up recently. But as a juror, I don't know what law that the basis of that court case, of that trial, of what it is. So again, it's just finding out how things work.
Maybe we should have led with that. But
I'm sorry.
No. I didn't even think to ask.
Well, the thing is that I didn't know that information at the time, so I was trying to explain things as my headspace at the time when I was going through it.
Mm-hmm.
This is research that I did after the fact.
Sure.
So I don't know a lot about that. I just saw that was on that piece about the particular law that's being that's determining the case on the uscourts.gov site. Just briefly saw that. I don't know, the details of it, but I just briefly saw that. So so that kind of made things different, for what we were doing, because then at least it could have, I don't know if you could know that ahead of time, basically before the trial, or if you can look it up during the trial, like when you go home and look up that particular law. So I'm not sure about that, of how prepared you could be on the basis of that. And then, like you said, maybe that can be picked up for a future episode, episode or something, because I just saw that kind of in passing, and I was like, what is that? So I don't know much about that, but even though the floor was open for us to ask questions as jurors, like if we needed clarification or questions, you kind of didn't know what questions to really ask, because we didn't have the basis of the law that was being applied for that particular trial.
Wow.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Let's put a pin on it right there, because that's foundational, and I didn't even think to. So
I'm like, that would have helped if we had been given that piece of information, and then we could have researched that law. Granted, we're not legal professionals, but we would at least have something kind of to go off of as civilians, and, as the jury. So that was literally brand new information for me, because as I literally just saw that. I literally just saw that actually today. So in preparation for our talk. So just aside from that, which I know that you said that's foundational, and I agree. Besides that, I was going to say just overall, my experience, I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed the experience, although, like I said, it's like a fish out of water in a lot of ways, because I didn't know what I was really getting into. It was very interesting to me, and just kind of the process, and then the actual case itself was very interesting, and I think it could be a rewarding experience for people. It was for me, in the sense of it gave me pride to be able to serve in the capacity that I did, and duty, and hopefully at administering fair justice, and having a direct and important impact on somebody's life, like we spoke about, as well as being educated on matters of the law, from that standpoint, but in a direct, meaningful way that I never had before. So, and you may also, like I said, develop some bonds with other fellow jurors, outside of the court case, the trial. So I even joked. I don't know if you remember. I joked with you, joking but not joking, of like, man, like, what if I did this? Is this something that you could do for a living? Like, be on a jury, be a juror, like a professional juror. At the time, because it was just like, I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. It was mentally exhausting, because you're given so much, inundated with so much information, like information overload with the evidence and the testimonies and things. It's just a lot of information packed in a short, period of time for hours and hours and hours on end. But I still enjoy the process. Okay. Just overall. So for my experience, I would just say fundamentally, there were some fundamental problems, like I said, with not really knowing the basis of the law that was being applied for that particular case. I also don't know if we were necessarily qualified, and if the criteria that they were looking for, if it really made sense, basically. But I would say overall, I enjoyed my jury experience. So again, thanks for having me.
Sure. And again, final words from me is just please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Y'all know the regulars on YouTube. We're gonna do this hopefully once a week. To be honest, I think this is extremely important. Anybody watching this, if you feel free to in the comments or reach out and if you want to be interviewed for your experience in jury duty and some practical application and some principles to discuss. There's at least a couple. And we will have probably the typical format. We want to try to have multiple people on to kind of interweave the experience to see the nuances with real world examples. So the more to come, and we as the jury are the judge. And this has been the Judge Jury Show. So with that, have a good night, everyone. Thank you, Elena, again.
Yes, thank you.
Have a good night. Take care.